Let's talk briefly about a subject that is a really hot topic in our society today, and it's heartbreaking and it's difficult to stomach, quite honestly. And it's the largest genocide that our planet has ever seen. We give it the name in the United States, abortion. And I want to give you a couple of tips and tricks on how to have decent discussions at the end, but I want to give you a couple of statistics about the approximate number of abortions since 1980, when abortion became legal, just in the United States is almost 62 million. I think it's, as we speak, it's like 61,900,000 abortions since 1980. That's 61,900,000 human lives that have ended in the United States alone. The number worldwide, I believe, is somewhere around 1.5 billion. To give you a quick example, or to help you understand this number, let's take the United States. Again, the number is almost 62 million lives ended since 1980. If we took 1 minute of silence for each life ended, it would take us more than 100 years of silence. 1 minute per life, that's 1,440 minutes a day. 525,600 minutes a year. In 100 years, that gives us 52,560,000 minutes, and we're still 10 million shy. So it would take us more than 100 years to mourn for only 1 minute each for all of the lives that have been ended in the United States due to legalized abortion. Here's the quick tips that I want to give you, because clearly this is a very heated and a very weighty discussion to have that is in our media all the time. So number one, as a Christian, you need to do your best to keep your cool. And I want to challenge you and encourage you to remember to be winsome and to be loving in the conversations that you have. Don't forget that when you're having these conversations, the person at the other end of the conversation needs to be loved, because A, they're deserving of love because they're made in the image of God. B, you don't know what they've been through in their life. And we want to love them. You don't know where they're coming from and why they've made the decisions that are made. And if you start throwing terms around and start throwing around a whole lot of hate, you're going to lose your audience, and you lose no matter what. And we don't want to do that. We always want to be showing love as much as we can to the people on the other end of the conversation. That being said, you need to have a couple of, and I'm just going to give you two quick things that I've learned. There's a lot of ways to discuss this, and a lot of different avenues that this can take. I want to encourage you, to learn some of them. First, I want to give you a resource. Pro-life. I'll leave a link down in the description. But Pro-Life Training Institute, Scott Klusendorf is pretty well known around definitely this country and the world as one of the leading pro-life apologists. And he has tons of great conversations and instruction for you on his website and in the books that he's written. So I'll leave a link to that. But personally, I like to avoid the word abortion because that can lead you down rabbit trails that you don't want to go. Maybe you've been in conversations before where you use the term abortion or you use the term pro-life, and you need to define your terms. Because pro-life I've had this happen to me before. So does that mean you're against the death penalty? We're going to get into not the death penalty, but keeping the main thing. That's not a direction you want to go. So I'm very specific in the claim that I am making. And the claim that I am making is abortion purposefully murders a human life. So that's the claim that I would make. And I am against the intentional, purposeful murder, that's a specific word, of human life. when you define it that way, if that's what your belief is, whether or not you're on that side of the spectrum or not, if that's what your belief is, now we have something to discuss. We're not going to go down a rabbit hole of war. We're not going to go down a rabbit hole of capital punishment and the death penalty. We want to talk about the purposeful ending of a human preborn life. And that's what the term abortion, in my opinion, is. So that's why I'm anti-abortion. I don't say I'm pro-life. I don't say I'm, whatever the term is if I'm asked or if I'm posed with this question, I am anti-abortion. Or even more specifically, I'm against murdering innocent human beings, whether they have been born yet or not. Okay, so that's important. Why do I say that's important? I picked this up from a lecture that I heard from Scott Klusendorf, actually. I was lucky enough to be in attendance, and he said something that has changed the way I handle almost all discussions that I have, not just on abortion, but that's keep the main thing the main thing. Don't let the people that you're discussing take you down these rabbit holes that maybe you're not prepared to answer well enough, or maybe you don't have the information right in your head. Whatever the case is, there's always, when two people are having a discussion and one person seems to be, let's say they feel like they're losing, they'll try to drag the conversation into all these random areas to get you to trick yourself into saying something random that you're not prepared or you haven't thought through. Keep the main thing the main thing. We're not talking about war. We're not talking about the death penalty. Okay, those are two examples that we talked about earlier. By the way, we can discuss the statistics for rape and for incest, and those are horrific events that I never ever want to diminish the person's emotional and what they've been through, if that's the case. But my statement is, I am against the murdering of an innocent human life, and that's the main thing. Now, if the person on the other end of the spectrum doesn't agree that that's a human life, I guess that's where the conversation needs to go, right? Because you can't defend that. You can't have a conversation about it until you have decided whether or not that's a human life or not. Most of science is in agreement, and as far as cellular reproduction and stuff, that it's human. Your decision is essentially whether you're okay with killing it or not. So here's a second quick tip, and this is an acronym I want you to stick in your back pocket, and that's the acronym SLED. SLED. This acronym will help you in your abortion conversations. If you are for abortion and you've made it this far in the video, first of all, thanks so much for watching. I'd love to get into a discussion with you about that. But if you're for abortion, I want you to think about this acronym also. And that's SLED, SLED. That's size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. So when it comes to ending intentionally a life based on their inconvenience, I have a hard time even understanding some of the arguments that people make, to be honest with you, and I'm not saying that flippantly. I have a hard time understanding the convenience and my body, my choice. I honestly don't understand that. And the reason that I don't understand that is because it's a human being. So this tip is size, level of development, environment, and degree of dependency. That means, do we base how important or what we do with a human based on their size? I want you to think about that, because my children, when they were born, were only like 18 inches. Were they less important or less of a human being when they were only 18 inches? There are full-grown adults around the world that don't get much taller than, let's say, 24 or 36 inches. Primordial dwarfs, for example. By the way, how about on the other end of the spectrum, once you get too tall, is that it? Like, well, you're no longer valuable because you're too tall. So when does size matter? When it comes to human development, and whether or not you're important. Too big, too small, what is that? If you're making the claim that abortion is okay, you have a number in your head, and we need to agree on that number, because I don't think the size of a human really matters. Level of development. How mentally developed are these humans, and when does level of development matter? A good example is walk into any hospital in this country and in probably most countries, and you're going to run into quite a few humans of different ages, of all different levels of development. Some of them are developmentally delayed for whatever the case may be. Some of them might be schizophrenics. Some of them might have multiple personality disorders. Some of them might be 1 or 2 years old. You're 1 or 2 years old, and if you've never had a kid, a 1-year-old can't do a whole lot. Some of them, the only thing you're born knowing how to do is suck so you can eat. Some of them don't do that very well, and they kind of have to. So does that mean that they're not good enough and we should be allowed to kill them? So at what level of development is a human life valuable? Environment. Where are you on the planet? Does that matter? Does it matter whether you're in a uterus? Does it matter whether you're in a home? Does it matter whether you're in a suburb or a city or a state? Does it matter whether you're in the air? We send astronauts. I'm under the impression that there are people flying above us almost all the time, because we have space stations now. They don't even live in our atmosphere, or they don't live on the planet still. Are they still valuable? Because they don't live here. They're not located where we're located. How about scuba divers or people that live on submarines? They can live on their submarines these days that they can live underwater for 29, 30 days. Do you see how kind of ridiculous some of these examples start getting when you're talking about this human life? Now that we've decided that this is a human life, does their environment really matter? Does their environment dictate how we should treat them and whether or not we should be allowed to kill them or not? So size, level of development, environment. And the last one is degree of dependency. And they're all important. This one is equally as important, because is it okay to kill somebody because they are more or less dependent on somebody else? My answer is no. That's not an okay reason to end a life, because they're a little too dependent on you, or maybe because they're not dependent on you enough. Again, you need to run the gamut from a 2-day-old baby to a 2-year-old child to a 20-year-old child that has mental disabilities that is still fully dependent on their parents, to how about a 70, 80, 90-year-old parent, grandparent that is fully dependent on another life. How about a perfectly healthy 35-year-old guy who just got hit by a car? And he got hit by a car and now he's in a coma because his degree of dependency is higher and he depends on machines to keep him alive for the next 2 or 3 days. Does that make him or her more or less valuable? Does that give us the right to end that human life just because they're a little bit extra dependent? I think that if you've hung on this long, this is a little bit longer of a video, but if you've hung in there with me, you can see where these two little tips, when you get into your discussion on abortion, can help you out, maybe give you a few tools to stick in your tool bag. I really encourage you to go check out Scott Klusendorf's website. Again, I'll include it down at the bottom. And I encourage you to do some research about this topic before you get involved in a conversation, so you can use some of these tips and tricks and tactics to help guide your conversations. Because I want to remind you that almost 62 million lives have been ended because they're inconvenient. In this country alone, we've banned plastic straws, but we're still murdering human life by the thousands every single day in this country. And it's important that if you're blessed enough to get into a conversation with somebody who believes that abortion is okay, that you can lovingly and winsomely explain some of these things: size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency, and keeping the main thing the main thing.